I'm Don Dickson, and I want to thank you for joining me once again for another edition of our structure fishing workshop. I'm going to sort of stray a little bit today, mainly because of some concerns that were voiced to me at the conclusion of the last video we did. You know, as a fishing educator, my objective in my career has been totally to help you become a better fisher person, to help you become more successful catching fish. And at times, I'm probably not as succinct as I should be on certain subjects, or maybe I take a shortcut when I really shouldn't have. And I'm always reminded that of all of the subscribers and everyone who's viewing these videos, they're at different skill levels. Some are experts, some are beginners, and most everybody's somewhere in between that. So I can't really just target my comments to one or the other of those skill levels. So what I try to do is give the entire picture in lay terms, and in some cases, if you are an expert, it's just a reminder for you. It might maybe just verifies for you a certain subject, and if you're just beginning your study of structure fishing, hopefully you'll be able to pick up on what I was teaching and totally understand it when I'm done. So that's the objective. It doesn't always get done. So I've noticed and become aware of that because of all of the many comments that I received after the last video. Not just comments, but a bunch of emails. And I realized that there was some real confusion on what it was that we covered the last time we got together. So I'm going to stray from what I was normally going to do today and go back and clear that up, and hopefully everybody will get the correct picture of what I was trying to say when discussing the importance of a sharper break. Now, one of the things I always try to stay away from is using one specific fishing situation to explain away an entire subject matter. That just really doesn't work, never did, never will. So I kind of stay away from that and just sort of go through the study material and then allow you to apply it to your fishing situation one way or the other. But as I said, there are times when I guess I didn't do a really good job at relaying a certain truth, or maybe I did do a fairly decent job, but you just forgot about it. But whichever the case is, I'm going to try to clear it up. I want to go back over that situation that happened out at Pomme de Terre. And the only reason I brought it up in the first place as an example was that you were already familiar with that story. It's a clear-cut, emphatic story of how important a sharper break can be. Where there's 4 fish over 20 pounds caught, won a tournament going away where 250 other people never caught a fish. It wasn't because I'm a genius. It's because we found a sharper break. That was the only reason. Now, I have to take the story from the very beginning, from a fishing standpoint, from an education standpoint. I'm going to take it from the beginning to answer all the questions I got. Now, these questions that I received at the closure of that video, many of them were of this nature. Gee whiz, Don, I have no idea why you even stopped at that place. That place doesn't look like anything to me. What in the world were you thinking when you arrived at that spot and said, oh, gee whiz, maybe I'll win a tournament here? I mean, it didn't look like anything. I don't know the skill level of the person who asked that question, so it's hard to make a judgment there. But rather than make a judgment, I looked through some of the emails and I got some of the stuff that sounded sort of like this. I have read Buck's book. I've actually gone through the advanced material. And I've listened to all of your videos, Don, and I looked at that spot and thought, what were you thinking? That looks like nothing to me. I don't understand why in the world you ever got to that spot, number one, nor do I understand why you would even bother to start fishing it. Now, these are the kind of questions that I was receiving. So I got to thinking, listen, my objective has never changed. I want to help you become a better fishing person. I want to help you catch more and bigger fish. So if this discussion and what I showed in the last video confused almost everybody, I thought it was important that we go back and go through it step by step. And there's some really important points I want to make that I think will clear it up, number one. Number two, it does involve what our study area is right now anyhow, structure breaks and break lines. In this case, a sharper break, one of the most important breaks we have in fishing. So let's go back to pomme de terre one more time, and let's clear this up. First, I want to address the very first question that was posed to me, and that was, why in the world did you even go anywhere near this place? How did you arrive there? What were you looking for? Well, okay, let's start right there. I was looking for watercolor. Now, we're not going to go into a study on weather and water to our next area of study is weather and water, but today I'm not going to go into that. But I have mentioned in the past, and I just briefly mentioned, that as you recall earlier last summer, I talked about the importance of watercolor. When you have clear water, you have maximum light penetration, just like today, bright blue day. You have maximum light penetration. And that's the one thing fish can't stand. They have a hard time reacting to this bright light. So when you have a bright light condition and you have clear water, that just accentuates the fact that our light penetration is going to go deeper and deeper and deeper the clearer the water. So when you have gin clear water, you have maximum light penetration, deep fish, and the deeper a fish goes in any body of water, the colder the water becomes, and that creature is a cold-blooded creature. So that in turn means that his metabolism slows down, and in most cases he's so stinking dormant downstairs in clear water, we can't catch him. He's so deep, we're not going to have much of a chance to catch him. So we arrived at pomme de terre. It was gin clear. The activity and where the launch was, or where the weigh-in was down at the dam, the area of the dam. And I've mentioned it before, there was beautiful structure in that area. There was structure as far, everywhere you looked, there was great looking structure. But it was gin clear water. So just in normal fishing, I knew I needed to find some better watercolor. And in the reservoir, that's possible. And I've talked to you about this. When I'm looking for better watercolor in a reservoir, especially in late summer or early fall, which this was, all the sediment, everything in that lake has settled down at the dam. And that water is gin clear. It's as clear as it's going to be all year, period. And to make matters even worse, the night of the practice day, we had this big welcome dinner and some lectures going on. I talked to you about that before too. And during that lecture period in this high school gymnasium, we heard this weather coming through. It was a nasty cold front. That rain was hitting and the storm, wind was blowing. It was terrible. Now the practice day temperature, air temperature, early fall, was in the mid-70s. The following morning, the very first day of the tournament, the temperature was in the 40s, the low 40s. The highest it got, I believe, was 47 degrees that day. Now, again, we're not talking about weather conditions either right now, but you do know that a cold front, I talked about it before, cold front is the worst possible thing that a fish has to deal with. It creates a lot of changes, not only in pressure, but light and a whole bunch of stuff we're going to be talking about next month. But here we have this cold front going through for a 2-day tournament, and that just convinced my partner and I that there was only one chance we were going to have to catch a muskie and win that tournament. We needed to find some good watercolor. And in a reservoir, that simply means you have to move towards the headwaters. The further you get away from the dam and the further you go up that reservoir, the better chance you have of finding some better watercolor. And that's exactly what we did on our practice day, even before the cold front came through. Now again, let me just add this real quick. You can trace and judge the severity of a cold front by the differences in the air masses. Now, most of you know what a cold front is. It's where you have a low pressure system meeting a high pressure system. Where these two air masses collide, you have a cold front. You normally will have a drop in temperature, and you'll have precipitation and so on and so forth, and then it'll be cleared out after the rain goes through. It's the passing of a cold front, and the fish have a hard time dealing with cold fronts. Now, you can have some cold fronts that don't have much effect on the fish, and you have others that have a tremendous effect. Now, the severity of the front will determine the level of negative impact it will have on the fish. Now, how do we judge the severity of the front? That's simple. The difference in the air temperature. What's the difference in the temperature of the air masses? Well, in the case of Pomme de Terre, practice day was in the mid-70s. The next day was in the mid-40s. A 30-degree drop in temperature. Oh, my word. You can't get any more severe than that. Plus, it didn't feel like it was in the mid-40s either, because we had a hard north wind that made it feel like it was in the 30s. It was miserable. It was the worst possible thing that could have happened to that tournament, as it turned out. Now, my partner and I had gone up the reservoir the day before in the practice session just because we knew we wanted to find better watercolor. But now, with the passing of that horrible cold front, it became even more important. We had to go as far as we needed to go to find watercolor. I don't care how far, as long as we had depth in the channel, I was prepared to go as far as I had to find some decent watercolor. It was our only chance. Our only chance. So, during the practice day, we kept going up that reservoir, and I don't remember exactly how far it was. It was probably 8 miles, 9 miles, 10 miles maybe up from the dam. And we were running in a little boat with a small engine, so it wasn't like we just raced up there. It took half a day to get up to where we ended up fishing. But when we got up to this area, this certain area, which I circled for you the last time we talked, I said, here is where we won this tournament. And everybody wanted to know, why in the world would you stop there? What were you looking for? What we were looking for was watercolor. And as I approached that confluence, main river channel, side feeder stream cut, where those two streams came out and met, it formed a structure, it formed a bar. But I could tell on that side feeder stream side, it was creating a different watercolor. No longer clear. We had watercolor. So when people ask me in the questionnaires from last week, they say, what made you go up there? Watercolor. What was I looking for? Watercolor. That's all I was looking for. I needed to find watercolor. Now, go with me on this, because we've done some study together. Once I'm in an area and I found what I was looking for, what I thought was imperative, and especially after that cold front, it's imperative we find some good watercolor. And we found it. So now what's my first question? How much water do we have in the channel? I have to have over 20 feet or I'm not going to fish. I may find watercolor, but I'm not going to fish if I don't have at least 20 feet in the channel. Well, there was 50 feet in the channel. Actually, back then I believe it was 55, but let's just call it 50. I had 50 feet in the channel. I still had plenty of water. But now I had watercolor. Watercolor and depth. So now, again, we've been through some studies. What's the next thing I got to look for? Structure. Structure is my guide to finding fish, right? Now, I don't want to just fish structure. If I just wanted to fish structure, I'd still be down at the dam with all that beautiful structure. But I had to find watercolor, which I found. Now I have to identify the structure in that area to fish. to take advantage of my good watercolor. I have to have structure. Well, somebody said, well, that didn't look like much to me. Are you kidding? Seriously, are you kidding? We got two streams coming out creating a beautiful bar. I was 100 yards from that bar and saw it as I was moving up the river. Now, once we had found that watercolor and we found the depth in the channel and we saw that bar, we saw that structure, what do you think the next thing I did was? What do you suppose was my next step? I had to get a detailed map of that structure. I didn't want to spend a lot of time, but I needed some detail on that structure so I'd know how to fish it. As you recall, we did a little study on map and interpretation back in the summer. I said you can't rely on a map to give you the spot. 99% of the time you can't. You need to get a detail of what's down there when you're on the water, a detailed map. And we went through a whole study on how to get a detailed map of a bar, a hump, and all these different structures. We went through all of that. So that was my next step. I had to get a quick detailed map up here. I didn't have to draw it. I just had to get a quick map of this structure so I'd know how to fish it. The main lakes side, it was pretty steep and it wasn't that interesting to me. It had a distinct finger and some stuff, but it was so sort of steep and going off pretty shallow, I didn't much care for it. But I was really interested on the western side because that particular side of the structure, going up into that side feeder stream cut, had better watercolor. So at that point, and not before that, but at that point, I had my partner pull out the contour map that we had of Pomme de Terre. Now, when he pulled that map out, we had looked over it before. We saw all the major great looking structures that are all over that lake. It's a great looking lake. But we hadn't pinpointed anything in the area of this watercolor. But now that we found the depth and the watercolor and the structure, now I wanted to take a look at the map and see what the map showed me. Now I will give you the benefit of the doubt on this one. We had a paper map that was more detailed. It was more detailed than Navionics today. So as I decided that I wanted to move up into the feeder cut, I wanted to follow this break line up into the feeder cut, and we established, didn't have just one, it had about 3 break lines on it. Had a shallow break line, had one, as I recall, around 15, 17, something like that. And then we had our drop off into the side feeder stream cut. So I was looking at the contour map, and the first thing that I saw was a sharper break. And again, I really can't remember whether it was 100 yards up that feeder cut. I can't remember exactly. I gave you an approximate of about where it was. But there was a sharper break occurring. And it was breaking right into that side cut. And I said, look at that spot right there. There's a sharper break, clear as day. So as we looked at this area, I just said to my partner, this is where we got to spend our time. We got the depth, we got watercolor, we got fishable water, we got multiple break lines, we have a good deep drop off, and we got a bunch of wire line and spoon plugs. I said, this is where we're going to come. This is where we'll start tomorrow morning. So we left that spot knowing that that's where we were going to start our tournament right there. We didn't know we were going to finish it there, but we knew we were going to start it there. It had the components of what it was we needed. Now, some of the comments that I got on my emails. Well, it looks like, yeah, there's a little bar there, but it looks like it broke off at 5 feet. Doesn't, you know, there was no deep structure there. There was nothing. Well, that's nonsense. But I can't blame you for saying it. You know why? Because Navionics didn't show it to you. If you'll go back with me in your mind to what we talked about in the summer when we were doing detail mapping, interpretation of structure, I said the number one thing you cannot do, you can't rely on a map to give you the spot. The map will not give you the spot. It might put you in the area, which this did. but it's not going to give you the spot 99% of the time. You've got to do some detail work to find out what's really there. Now, if you look at navionics today, you wouldn't think that much about it. But if you were grounded in all of the Buck Perry knowledge and the discoveries and all of his teachings and everything I talk about, you would know, well, I don't know what's there until I do a detailed map. I got to go to work to find out what's there. Maybe what I'm looking for is there, but navionics just doesn't show it. I got many more examples of that I can show you. In the end, the fish are going to tell you whether or not you're right or wrong. But you can't interpret anything until you get a detailed map of it. You cannot interpret it from navionics. You can't interpret it from 99% of all the contour maps. Now, the next day, of course, after that horrendous front, we knew more than ever we have to get to that watercolor and just keep our fingers crossed that one stinking fish might stick his head up. And if he does, we're going to be in the right place. See, when you do your detail work, you'll find these areas and you'll know exactly how to fish it. And as I was following that drop off and knowing about that sharper break, when I came to it, of course, I recognized it, identified it, and we threw a marker. I said, we've got to hit that spot for sure. We got to be exact in our presentation to hit that spot. Normally, under normal situations, and if I wasn't fishing for muskie, I would have anchored the boat up on the flat, up on the crown of the bar, and thrown a cast to that sharper break. But when fishing for the muskie, that trolled lure is much more effective. It gives the fish a chance to get around behind it, follow the lure, and take it. We talked about that prior to as well. So I knew that we had to hit it, but I still wanted to hit it with a trolled lure. And as you followed that drop off, it started to turn. Once you were up pretty deep up into that side feeder stream cut, it started to turn to the right. And about right at that turn is where that sharper break was occurring. So we had a little bit of a presentation problem, how to hit that thing, hit it just right. And really we had to make some what we call pattern passes, but we were able to do that, and we kept doing it because we knew that that was a key spot. Like Buck says, flashing light, here I am, here I am, here I am, here I am. And we knew if one fish stuck his head up, that would be the spot. So we had to keep our lure on that spot. Well, in the end, the fish verified our interpretation. They moved shallow enough that we could catch it. But they only moved to one spot, the sharper break. Now, we talked about how important a sharper break is. It's Buck's favorite thing in life was a sharper break. So we're fishing a tournament, and we knew that if we could catch one decent fish, we'd have a chance to win because the weather was so bad. Our experience told us it was so bad. One fish could win the tournament. Well, 28-pounder, when that one came in the boat, we were pretty convinced that could win the tournament. For sure. They'd only been stocked into that reservoir over a 10-year period. So we knew something close to 30 pounds, about as big as they could get. As it turned out, 28.2 was the state record. And our fish was 28 pounds. And the three fish that followed over the next day and a half were all over 20 pounds. 4 fish over 20 pounds, one almost 30 pounds, all exactly at the same exact spot. A sharper break. But on navionics, you don't see it, do you? No, you don't. Don't ever forget what I'm telling you. In order to know how to fish a structure properly, you must get a detailed map. You remember, if you watch my on the water training on mapping interpretation, I said, whatever it takes, take the time, learn how to do it, and take the time to do it. Now, this was blown up a little out of proportion because it was a tournament and how the results were. 250 guys did not catch one fish. So it was a big blown up thing. But the point is, in your fishing, you need to get a detailed map of every structure you're going to fish. Don't just start fishing. That's a mistake. Take 10 or 15 minutes, do a detailed map of that structure so you know how to fish it properly. And the results are going to pay off for you. You got to trust me on that. Now, I'm going to tell you a little closing story, and then we'll close off on this. I hope you're getting the idea. What led me to the spot? Watercolor. I was looking for watercolor. When I found it, then I had to establish, do I still have depth in the channel? Answer was yes, I had 50 feet. Then all I had to do was identify the structure in that area to see if there was any, which there was. And then I had to get a detailed map of that structure to know how to fish it. Now, as it turned out, that detailed map that I did told me how to fish it, but the actual contour map, the paper contour map that we had of the lake, once I opened that rascal up, I could see where those two contour lines came close together at that drop off, at that spot where it was turning, and I identified from the map a sharper point. So we targeted hitting that spot. Now, let me tell you two more things in closing. You know, a true scientist, to me, a true scientist, one of real value to mankind, regardless of the subject. It's somebody who puts in a study of a certain subject and does it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and does it for a lifetime. That's a real scientist. And that's Buck Perry. So when I'm relaying stuff to you folks, I've never claimed anything to be mine. In fact, I make sure that people understand Don Dickson never had an original idea about a fish in his life. All I did was learn from Buck Perry and have been passing along all of his knowledge to as many people as I possibly could. Okay, with all that being said, I'm going to close this off, but I want to tell you one little closing story that goes along with this. You know, in my 48 years of knowing Buck, he really was a scientist in the truest sense of the word. You could be talking about football or you could be talking about some other things that interest him, but you wouldn't go about 10 minutes before he'd start talking about fishing. Something else again about fishing. He was always talking about fishing 24/7. That was his life. So one of the things he used to do, he would always test me. If I was making a map of something, he'd ask me a question. He'd maybe try to lead me a certain way and get me to answer a question in the wrong way. But he was always putting me to the test. And after traveling with Buck for 6 or 8 years, you know, finally I started flipping the story a little bit towards him. You know, if I would do something, I'd ask him a question of what he thought about a certain situation when I had already proved it out or something like that, you know. So I would put him to the test. And of course, he was always right, you know, never wrong. And I was wrong on occasion, and he let me know too, but he was never wrong. But in this case, we go out there and win that muskie tournament. It's a big story. You know, it's a huge story because nobody caught any fish but us. So they had all these prizes back then. It wasn't money they gave. We had a 16-foot boat with a 35-horse engine, I think, and a trailer, and we had a 20-foot canoe with a little gas motor on that, a square-ended canoe, and depth signers, all kind of stuff. We had to rent a big truck to get that stuff back to North Carolina. So we drive back there, we get everything unloaded, and we're sitting down at dinner that night at Buck's place. And I brought out the map. Wish I still had it. I'd like to show it to you. At any rate, I broke out that map and laid it on the kitchen table. I said, Buck, I'm going to put a big circle here around the area where we were fishing. But we caught all 4 of those fish over 2 days now. We caught 2 fish each day. I said, but we caught all 4 fish in the exact same spot. And I circled the whole bar, all of it. I circled everything. I said, where do you think we caught the fish? I was planning on stumping him. And I figured he'd look at the map for 4 or 5 minutes and make a decision, you know, because he wasn't there. He'd never fished the place. I gave him this little quiz. Where do you think we caught the fish? He looked at that map and said, drew a little circle, said right there. He circled the exact spot within 10 seconds. It had never been on the lake. I thought for sure I had a chance maybe. But he's going to pick out the finger or pick out the end of the bar or something. You didn't know. When he cleaned up that feeder, cut 100, 150 yards, whatever it was, and circled that little sharper break, said, right there. And he just looked at me like, go ahead and try to tell me that wasn't the spot, because I know it was. You know, he knew. And he said, after I said, then I just shook my head and said something like, I guess I'm never going to be able to stump you. He said, well, Don, where else would it have been? Now, if you had the picture of that spot on the paper map that we had, I doubt whether you would have picked that spot out, but you might have. One thing for sure, you can't pick it out on Navionics. It's just more and more living proof that you can't be effective. You really can't be effective unless you're doing some detailed mapping of structure. You can't interpret something you don't have a map of. And that map's not good enough. It doesn't tell the story. That's why there was so much confusion out there, because that map doesn't tell the story. My detail told the story, but you weren't there with me. So you get a pass. But at the same time, I thought I wanted to bring all of that stuff into play. Not only did my side feeder stream cut have better watercolor and have that sharper break, but from a seasonal standpoint, that's where you'd expect those fish to be moving a little bit shallower than they normally would during the summer months. You'd expect them up in there, right where we found them. So there was a whole bunch of things that came together that produced those fish. And the least difficult part was presenting the lures. Once you've established the spot with all of the good reasons that you have through your general interpretation, putting the lure down there normally is the easy part. That's the easiest thing. And as it turned out, it was the easiest thing over those 2 days too, because we sure couldn't control the weather. We couldn't control the fact that those fish did not move. I bet you they didn't move for a week after that cold front. That's how bad it was. But yet if you're at the right spot, it's like where Buck, well, I always talk about how he drilled his finger in the water. See, that was a spot where I drilled my finger in the water and said, we got to hit that spot. We have to hit that spot. And when I laid the map out to Buck a week later and said, where do you think we caught the fish? And he went, right there. He drilled his finger in the water again and he wasn't even there. It's called experience. It's called a whole bunch of things. It's called his brilliance. He was always right, never wrong. That's why I feel so fortunate that I learned from him. But I didn't just learn a little bit, I learned a lot. So when I talk about everything that goes together, that has to come together in order to have consistent success, believe me when I say everything has to come together. And this should be even living proof to you once more that you cannot pinpoint your fish on the contour map 99% of the time. You just can't. You need to go to work on the water to find those fish. Now I'm going to give you one more example, almost in reverse of that, the next time we get together, so that when I talk to you about the importance of breaks and break lines and how fish utilize these features and how you and I can run into the fish by pinpointing, identifying, and recognizing these features based on lake type, season of the year, depths involved, and all of those things. Your fishing success is going to improve, my friend. It's going to improve. But I'm going to give you one more example of this before we move on and continue our discussion on breaks and break lines. With all that being said, thanks for being with me again today, and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and be sure to subscribe. to our channel if you haven't already done it. I appreciate you, my friends. We'll see you the next time.